Hey everyone, happy Friday. Just wanted to pop in here and share some travel information today. I was traveling locally today and I heard some people complaining about the wind, about the weather. So, yeah, there's a major winter storm going on right now. So, you may experience delays even into places like Las Vegas where there may be wind. Even getting out on the roads, double check before you go. Just be patient and build in some time. I know it can be frustrating, but better to get there late than not get there at all, as they say. I got an email from Avalo Airlines, and I recently noticed that some people aren't familiar with Avalo Airlines, and I believe that's how they're pronouncing Avalo Airlines. It's one of those low cost carriers where everything is kind of an add on, whether it's bags or a seat. But they do have some great prices. And I did like that when I had to cancel, I have funds still available. So I just wanted to pop onto it's Avelo, Avelo Air, AIR.com. And you want to go down and search there. They're also giving away a year's worth of flights, which, wow, can you imagine if they actually service the areas that work for you? And I think that's the big thing. Honestly, I'm a little disappointed the flights from and to Vegas have been cut down a bit, which you always want to go to Las Vegas, right? So that's a little disappointing. Also, to get from some cities, they have a big presence on the East Coast. So, like, I just pulled up their map. I haven't quite figured out how to do screen share yet on these go lives, but maybe I will before next time. You've got towns like Charleston, Savannah, Nashville, Chicago, some great cities to go for a weekend. So if you pick up an inexpensive flight, I can completely think this might be a good way. Just pack something in a backpack. You don't need a lot, possibly. So it can be very economical. On the West Coast, then it shifts over to Sonoma, which is Santa Rosa, which gets you close to Wine District, Northern California, Eureka, Medford, Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, Bend, Boise, Idaho. So a lot of different places, and LA is included, and they're putting Burbank. So I'm not sure if it's the Burbank airport, is what I'm guessing, and Palm Springs and Las Vegas. So again, Avalo Air. Check it out. If you follow them on Instagram, they are giving away free tickets every Tuesday. So you might want to follow their Instagram account, which is at Avelo Air, Aveloair. And in the same vein, I just wanted to go to Travel Zoo. A lot of you probably already know Travel Zoo. They've been around for a long time. They publish a week's worth of travel deals. They have a top 20 each week. Like right now, they're Oh, yeah, for a minute, I thought the date was wrong, but they've got, like, everything from lodging, so, like, this one's like a Lake Arrowhead resort on a private beach. Check the dates, though, because sometimes you think that you can take advantage of that right now or during a season that you wanna go, but sometimes some of those deals are for off-season. Like, I saw a deal for a place in Sedona, which if I scroll down may pop up, but the deal was for August, and if you think about it, August in Sedona can be a really hot, and some of us don't do well in triple digits. Whereas other people like thrive in the heat, they love to hang out by the pool. So, again, do your homework. If you're in Vegas, like they've got Penn and Teller tickets for $31, not a bad price, considering oftentimes even to go to an unknown comic, those tickets can be $45 each and more. They've got a guided tour, Rome, Florence, and Venice for $14.99. That might be a really good deal. Again, you want to look at how many days does it include airfare and where is those flights from, and what are the lodgings. Sometimes they give you a range when you actually get into the buy portion. I did take advantage of a deal that I saw on, I believe it was Expedia. This was pre-pandemic, and it was to go to London. And when I looked at the price, I was like, "Oh my gosh, let's do this." So, but once I got into the choosing, it's like, this hotel looks a little nicer, and for a little extra money, it's worth it. But it really saved a lot of money, and it was a great way to go sample a city, get over to London, because who knew at the time that, we wouldn't be traveling for a couple years. For those that like cruising, of course, there's always great cruise deals. I still haven't convinced myself that I would do a cruise. The Southwest Airlines is running a one-way flight sale. However, I'm often disappointed with Southwest. I must say that they really crashed and burned during the Christmas holiday. They left a lot of people upset, disgruntled. I haven't even heard recently if everyone's gotten their baggage retrieved, but I think they could do a little bit better with some of these sales, because oftentimes when you go click on that Southwest Airlines, in fact, let me pull it up on my. I wish I could show my screen, so I'm gonna have to work on that. Let me pull up Southwest Airlines. Like even for myself, when I go shop for these deals, yep, they've got the winter storm advisory. They are running their limited offer on their credit card to get a companion pass and 30,000 points. So that's a little tempting. Do your homework on that. And again, how many times do you actually fly Southwest? How many times do you actually fly with someone from your same outgoing city so that you could take advantage of that companion pass, which could be huge? But let's just say, for example, and I don't remember if, yeah, it looks like Southwest for me will fly into Boston. Let's just put in some dates. I think Boston's a great city any time of year, but I'm gonna put in, uh, let's do those dates, and let's just see if they have any of these deals they claim. Because I am, like I said, that those $59 deals are often limited routes, limited times. They need to extend that, especially right now. I think they really need to do a better job of regaining their customers' trust. And this is all just my simple, humble opinion. Take it for what it's worth. Um, but yeah, I think they need to work on their customer retention and keeping. I mean, I'm an avid Southwest flyer. I love Southwest, but if I had gotten stuck at an airport, I don't know how anxious I would be to book again. Yeah, I just put in some dates. All of these flights are over $200 each way, and that's in March, which to me is a little bit off season. Another way to do a flight comparison, and I may have mentioned this one in the past, is Momondo, and that's MOMONDO.com. I really like that one. So I'm going to put in my city of choice right now where I would be flying from, and just out of curiosity, put in the other city I was searching just a minute ago and see what dates I can come up with. What I like about Momondo is when I go to the calendar for fares, it does give you color coding. Like green is the lowest, yellow being medium, and then higher price. So you can clearly see that flying on Tuesdays and Thursdays often or cheaper, more bargain flights. So even this one, like if I were to go somewhere over the St. Patrick's Day weekend, for example. I know that doesn't sound fun to some people, but hey, I like to get my Irish on sometimes. Um, Definitely for some of you that know me know that head. So yeah, this will break down. So now I have comparison at least, so that if I am shopping Southwest, I can see like, well, how much of a deal am I getting compared to other airlines? The other thing I like about Momondo, and if you've listened to me previously, you may know that you can also see a little graph, so you can choose like, oh, if I adjust my return date a little bit, I can save. They also have an advice on, like, right now is a great time to book. Yes, you're 30 days out approximately if you're looking at St. Patrick's Day weekend, for example. Nonstop, it breaks it down. It can be almost double sometimes as far as the price, versus one stop will cut the price in half. But again, are we losing valuable time on our short getaway? Oftentimes we have only limited days away from our jobs. So then it is more important to get there, enjoy the city instead of spending all day flying to one location. Here, like Frontier and Spirit pop up. But again, remember, once you go to Frontier, for example, again, it's one of those sites where if you have to have a suitcase, which most of us have to have some sort of suitcase, and you want to choose a seat, there's all these little add ons. So sometimes by the time you're done adding everything on, you're basically back at the same price as you would be with a major. And what I mean by major carrier is our United, American Airlines, Delta, these places. So that's my little taste on airfare I wanted to touch on. Let's hop over to Tripadvisor real quick and see what we can see on that. Um, it kind of cheers me up sometimes when I'm kind of frustrated, not sure where I want to go, just to go to the travel forum, sometimes just to go to Instagram, look at some great pictures, do a Google search. Like if I'm thinking, hey, I may have some time in March, my calendar is open, where should I go? Dream a little. It's okay to dream a little. It's okay to spend time researching and planning, because to me, that just builds excitement and anticipation so that when you can actually buy that ticket and hit the buy button, you're actually really excited. For me, the research and the prep is actually part of the enjoyment. And recently I was talking to someone else and I was sharing places I loved, and they had never realized that, yeah, just getting more involved in your planning process, even if you still are handing that over to someone else, can really impact and add a lot to your trip. So let's just try the New England forum. For those of you that know me, you know that I love New England. I love New England in autumn. One day I'd like to go to New England in winter and just, again, no car needed, maybe just rent a car for a day or two if the wet roads are good enough to get out and wander about. But otherwise, just be cozy, walk around in a small city that's got coffee shops and good food, and just relax and enjoy. So I don't see a lot of new posts here. Yeah, so why don't we go back into one of the other posts? Let's try, let's go to, and there is every state listed. So if you've got a question, and always set yourself up for success by, if you've got time, why not get a copy of the free travel information from that state? Have it mailed to you, because sometimes having something in hand, you might just, whereas the internet is very specific, and unless you know what you're searching for, you may not realize, for example, that there's lots of waterfalls in a state like Ohio. You may not even realize there's covered bridges in Ohio or Indiana. But if you're flipping through a state tourism guide, sometimes something pops in front of your eyes that you're like, oh, wow, that does look interesting. So that's why sometimes I recommend paper items like regional magazines, regional free travel guides. Even if you come or travel to a big city like Las Vegas, sometimes it's hard to figure out like what shows, what's going on in the city. But there's often, go down to the front desk in the lobby. There's often lots of free information to be had that can give you spark a new idea, something you hadn't thought of. Okay, here's a few new things in the main category. Summer road trip with family. And we may have covered this one yesterday because they may have posted it yesterday, because it does look like it's the same family of four with a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old girl. And I traveled with my niece a year or two ago in the summer, and teenagers are tough these days. They have different interests, they have their own devices, but if you can somehow figure out something that they're interested in. Are they interested in all of a sudden like crystals and horoscopes or mysteries, or what is something that's kind of coming across their radar, and maybe it's in passing, that you can then find one thing to include per day or every other day so that you're engaging them in the trip. Becomes much more interesting to them than that one place. And it only takes as one place, whether it's going to have ice cream malts as at a really cool place there you can pick and choose your combinations, or maybe it's going to an escape room, or maybe it's even picking up finding a book that you give them ahead of time where you can, it outlines places that you may see on your journey. I think oftentimes that adds more interest to it. I know for myself, I was an art major, and just seeing some of the paintings in college, it's been many years, but oftentimes to see that painting in real life, whether it's the Mona Lisa or whether it's a Wyeth painting, it's like, oh my gosh, this is exactly where he stood to paint that house on the hill. And here's where the girl was. And you can, you kind of compare and contrast, and it brings it all full circle. It makes it more interesting. It comes alive. Let's see, they've got, so there's a couple more tips for traveling with multi ages. Is there a lot to do in these small cities? And they're talking about Portsmouth, which Portsmouth, Algonquin, Kennebunkport, they may seem smaller comparison to what? Los Angeles, Dallas, Texas, some of those places. But for the East Coast, they are actually pretty large places and have a lot going on, especially when you start going to sites. And it's right there on Tripadvisor too. You can go to things to do and it'll list multiple things to do. It's actually when you get, and this is where, again, maybe if you're not familiar with the area, get yourself a paper map, because often online, and I have this problem too when I pull up Google Maps, it's not easy often to see what's past the little area I may be zoomed into. But if I've got a paper map in hand, it's a lot easier to visualize, like, wow, Burlington, Vermont over here, just, they're using a bigger font. Larger font means larger area. The color around the city, like this one's got a big yellow square, and I don't know if I can hold that up for you to see. That is a larger place, whereas anything with a smaller font, smaller writing, it kind of decreases in size by the size of the place. Like, again, if you look at Vermont, and I don't know if you can see that, Burlington's got a really big bold type, meaning it's one of the largest places in Vermont population wise, space wise, and again, things to do wise, versus St. Albans, which is right up here. A little bit smaller font was used. Go over to Stowe, again, much smaller font. And then from there, you whittle down even to these little small towns like Hyde Park. And the other thing to be aware of is when you're thinking about something, and I share this story often for those of you that know me, Woodstock. A lot of people associate, especially a lot of people, or your older parents, grandparents, great grandparents that may have grown up during the era of Woodstock, the music festival. They just think, oh, you're talking about Woodstock where all the hippies got in the mud and there was that crazy music thing. No, there's a Woodstock, Vermont in almost every state out east. There's a Woodstock, New Hampshire. There's a Woodstock, Vermont. There's even a Woodstock, Illinois, believe it or not. So Woodstock is used more than once, so you got to be careful of what you're putting in, especially if you're doing a search for hotels. If you don't specify what state, you may end up getting a location. You may end up accidentally even booking a place that's not anywhere near where you might be staying. So just some fun, quirky facts like that. Same thing with Concord. There's a Concord, Massachusetts. There's a Concord, New Hampshire. Very different in history, very different, two different states, two different places, different things happened there. So just a few tidbits on that. But again, when you're talking about, is there a lot to do in these, quote, small cities? Number one, they may not be so small in comparison to, like, Vermont is very rural. Maine is kind of rural when you look at it. Most of the cities and towns that we're aware of are along that coastal route off of Route 1, whereas you've got the whole rest of the state with lakes and forests and moose and all kinds, mountains, waterfalls, all kinds of things. So just doing a little bit of homework, and again, the definition of what one person's child likes, what's considered a kid, and what someone else's kid likes can be wildly different. I know some kids that love to shop. They love to go window shopping. They can be entertained looking at shops, wandering through places, whereas someone else, may get very quickly bored, or they may be sensitive to too much noise, too much activity. So it really is dependent on your interest, your family's interest, but weighing that in and kind of taking that into account when you're building your itinerary. So that's again, I kind of probably spent a lot of time on those family type thing, but I know it can be challenging to travel with families. I know it can be hard planning, and the person that's doing the bulk of the planning offers an emotional attachment that you want everyone to be happy. So you're trying to people please, and that can be challenging. So this is where maybe employing a travel advisor, a travel trip planner, or even finding a pre-made, a lot of books like Lonely Planet, they have some pre-made itineraries that you can just say, hey, let's vote on this one and we're going to use this. But honestly, there's a lot of you can gather from working with a travel planner and picking their brain, and plus then you can throw us under the bus if it doesn't work out, right? Let's see, Acadia National Park first timers. This one was newly posted perhaps today, or the reply. That's sometimes why it gets confusing, because they'll put a time on it. We are first timers to Acadia National Park, not knowing the mountain and wanting to do easy hikes and walk the beach. Where should we stay? Is there a beach in the park? There is a beach, and that's going to be closer to Bass Harbor Lighthouse, I believe, and Southwest Harbor. Let me pull that up. Just do that quick. Southwest Harbor, there is a beach right there, and there was a nice mom and pop restaurant. Restaurant, yeah, restaurant, but also a small hotel motel literally across the street from a beach. Now, some of the quote beaches in Maine are just by nature more rocky. They're not all sand beaches. I do know there's quite a few sand beaches on the southern section of Maine as you're going up, like near York and Wells, and lots of places to stay right across the road from that sand beach. But Southwest Harbor, and again, you may want to split your stay. And for some people, they don't like switching hotels. But for some of us, it makes sense, because if we're early risers, we can get up super early and we're as close to the Bass Harbor Lighthouse as possible to go there for sunrise or sunset, which I advise getting there early. Stake out your spot, because everyone wants to get that shot. There's not a lot of space. So you will kind of get crowded in there. Or just even walking the beach. Again, it's much more enjoyable when there's a few people instead of like everybody with their dogs and kids, and just just a different experience, let's put it that way. Southwest Harbor, I would look up. I don't have that hotel off the tip of my tongue, but if you do a search, I'm sure you'll find it. And hopefully, if you look at Google Maps, a lot of time that's a little good way to use Google Maps, is you can hone in on that area of Southwest Harbor, then search hotels, motels, and it'll pin drop a lot of places. And sometimes those places you won't always find a lot of advertising for, like they won't come up high in Tripadvisor or Yelp because of the money to spend to advertise. But if you do a little bit of homework, look at for photos, look for when was the last review that was written on it. Call the location yourself and ask questions, but also do your homework. Honestly, look for who stayed there last. If there hasn't been a recent review, that might be a little bit of a red flag. Places unfortunately have gone downhill, and not with the pandemic, you've had people that just haven't been able to put the money back in to do repairs, to fix it up. And then it can kind of become like, oh, people live there on a month to month basis, which, that brings in a different clientele, and it may not feel comfortable for you and your family, or you by yourself. Let's be honest. Nobody needs to, you want to enjoy your time. You don't want to be feeling like you're watching your back all the time. So some people dropped in some comments, but definitely, and if you're talking about Cadillac Mountain, you'll often hear about sunrise on top of Cadillac Mountain. Double check the Acadia National Park website. They are taking parking reservations because it is a fairly small parking lot up there. So depending on when you're going, reserve your parking spot. And you might want to reserve If you're staying, say at least, I always advise at least a minimum of 2 nights in Acadia National Park. So you would have the potential of 2 sunrise days. So make a reservation for both days, because if it's autumn, honestly, those spots go quickly. And if that's an experience you want to have, you may wake up on day one, you may drive up there. This is a true story, happened to me. You can't promise the weather. I drove up there in a fog bank and literally saw nothing of, I mean, there was no sunrise, there was no view, with some rocks and a bunch of people all parked everywhere. And we were all waiting for, and it didn't break. It didn't break through that morning. So, had I had another morning to dedicate to potentially going up there for sunrise, I could have tried on day two. So that's some tidbits on Acadia. The carriage trails is what they call them, that the Rockefellers put into Acadia National Park. They make lovely paths for renting bikes, and there are places now that are allowing e-bikes. So if you're not into like doing the hard work yourself, you could investigate e-bikes. There was a place that was renting horses, and you could ride horses on these paths. Remember, with horseback riding, though, you may not be able to say stop, get off, take as many photos, because your horse may continue on, or it might be with a guide. Again, do a little bit of homework, do some investigation. Drop me a note. I can always research any of these things further for you if that's of interest. That's what we do as travel guides, travel advisors, travel planners, or travel coach. I don't know what you want to call us, but we love what we do, and we're more than happy to do the extra legwork for a lot of these places and things that we know are available. Um, Toddler friendly lodging. This is always a good one. I always suggest, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like anyone's replied to this one. I'm starting to plan a trip to Maine, possibly Vermont, for September or early October. We'll be driving up from the Boston area with our kid, who will be about 18 months, so about a year and a half. We'd prefer to be somewhere on or near the coast, as far north as Camden, maybe a little further, especially toddler friendly. And they're talking about places to run around outside, family friendly animals on site. That's an interesting way to put it, friendly animals. You may want to look at a farm stay. You mentioned Vermont. There's some wonderful farm stays in Vermont that would be perfect for your toddler. Families are usually generally running those, and they're aware of kids. They have animals that are, comfortable with children, whether those are dogs or, chickens or, sheep, cows. There's all kinds of animals. But again, then you can get on the phone with some of these owners. They're parents themselves, and oftentimes I like it when inns and small lodgings have an about page. You want to see who's owns it, who's running it, what are their interests, because it gives you that taste of, oh, they have children, they know what it's like to have a toddler that's just getting excited about running around. So they'll be better able to answer your questions, because some bed and breakfasts honestly are adults only, and they'll say that, like, no one under 18 or no one under 15, or I've seen even wording like well-behaved teenager. So, ask questions. Things like stairs too, or I don't know, how close to the road is it? I mean, there could be a lot of things that you might want to take into account. Like this one even mentions having a high chair, a crib, baby gear, or you may want to look at an Airbnb. Yes, you would probably be on your own with that Airbnb, but then you could have maybe a dedicated space where you can have your child safely play. I've seen a lot of the parents that travel with those unfolding travel mats. There may even be places where you can, say, rent some things. These are all things to investigate. And luckily, we're in an age where there's a lot more possibilities, I think, than ever before. That's what's wonderful about traveling now. When I was a kid, there weren't all of these things like an Airbnb. We didn't have Turo to rent your car. Your choices were a bit more limited and just your access to information. Same with renting the car. Sounds like they're going to be driving themselves up from Boston. But again, even with a young child and yourself, it might be good to break up that drive. Use that site travelmath.com to start figuring out where to break up that route. And you may also post your query for this as well on, which it looks like they noted that they also posted it on the Vermont forum and the Maine specific forum, which is where this one is, and maybe even New Hampshire, because New Hampshire sits between Maine and Vermont. And I think New Hampshire often gets left out. It's kind of like it's got hidden treasures in there, and everyone just kind of bypasses it for some reason. Maine has got the incredible coastline, the beach, the lighthouses, which maybe you can split your time. And I wouldn't say you'd even have to go as far as Camden. Although Rockland is pretty special, I think you might find a lot of what you're interested in on that southern part of the Maine coast. And then you're close enough to do that cut through New Hampshire, do that drive on the Kank, which is incredible in the fall. And now there's lots of places to pull off, lots of places to have a picnic. So, and again, hang on tight to your child, but just to get outside and, sit on a bench, listen to the waterfall, all of that, walk through the leaves a little, get a stroller, get, one of those backpacks that I see for kids that you can carry them in, whatever works for you. But again, safety, be super careful. Oftentimes I see too many kids just running off, and there is opportunity, unfortunately, along the Kank, many rocks and water, and you just wouldn't want to have an accident of any kind. And then Vermont, lots of beautiful places that have farm stays, and you might even have to use those as your search. Farm stay to find some of these places that will have a breakfast, have things for your kids to do, have animals and explore that, expose them to that, but yet be close enough so that if you did want to go into a town for a little bit nicer meal, and this is where too, maybe having your nicer meal in the middle of the day with your child. So you as well don't feel like you're impacting other diners. And a lot of restaurants may be more child friendly at lunchtime, let's suppose, versus dinner time when it's more their higher end menu, a little bit more upscale crowd. But those are just some tips I have. I've probably yammered on enough for today. Check out my website. It's yourphototravelguide.com/contact. You can drop in your query or question. We can hop on a free chat and talk about specifically your itinerary. So have a great evening, everyone. Take care.